speed without wisdom is just noise waiting to become silence. I learned that truth on a scorching afternoon in Redemption Valley, watching something I never understood until the moment it was too late to look away. What happened next changed everything, not just for the cocky gunslinger who thought he owned the world, but for every soul who witnessed it. Some lessons are written in blood. This one was written in mercy. And before you hear how it ended, let me tell you how it began. If you're watching from another country, drop a comment below and let me know where you're from. And if you enjoy stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe. There's more coming. The town of Redemption Valley sat in the shadow of red cliffs like a wound that never quite healed. Dust devils danced through empty streets. 3 saloons stood where 5 used to be. The rest had burned or been abandoned when the mines dried up and hope followed. What remained were the stubborn, the broken, and the few who had nowhere else to go. Into this dying place rode a man who moved like he was carrying the weight of decades on his shoulders. Nobody knew his name at first. He arrived on a Tuesday morning, leading a paint horse that looked as weathered as he did. His clothes were trail-worn but clean. His hat brim was pulled low. When he walked, there was a careful economy to his movements, like someone who'd learned that wasted motion meant wasted years. He took a room above the general store, paid for 2 weeks in advance with coins that looked older than the building. The owner, a widow named Margaret Shunn, watched him climb the narrow stairs and noticed how he gripped the railing, how his knees protested each step. Just an old man, she thought. Another drifter passing through. But there were details that didn't quite fit. His boots, for instance. Expensive leather, custom-made, broken in but meticulously maintained. The kind of boots that spoke of better days and careful habits. His gun belt rode low on his right hip, the holster positioned at an exact angle. Not the casual carry of a farmer or merchant. This was the placement of someone who'd worn iron so long it had become part of his skeleton. And his hands. Weathered, yes. Scarred, certainly. But steady. Absolutely steady. He spent his first week doing simple things. Swept the boardwalk outside his building every morning at dawn. Ate beans and cornbread at the small cafe run by an elderly couple who asked no questions. Tended his horse with a gentleness that made Margaret's grandson smile. The boy would watch from the stable door as the old man brushed the paint's coat in long, patient strokes, whispering to the animal like it understood every word. In the evenings, he'd walk the perimeter of town, always the same route, always noting the exits, always choosing a seat in the cafe or the quieter saloon where he could see the door and keep his back to the wall. These were habits carved deep, reflexes that didn't fade with age. The horse, that paint mare, seemed to understand him in ways that went beyond training. When he approached, she'd nicker softly and lower her head. When he left, her ears would track him until he disappeared from view. Once, when a drunk stumbled too close to her stall, the mare's warning snort brought the old man from his room in seconds, moving faster than anyone had seen him move before. People began to notice other things. The way he walked on the balls of his feet, reducing the sound of his spurs to barely a whisper. How his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging faces, measuring distances, tracking hands. How he positioned himself in rooms. Always near an exit, always with clear lines of sight, always where he could move without obstacles. Margaret's grandson, a boy of 12 named Tommy, started following him at a distance. Not with suspicion, but with fascination. He'd grown up on stories of gunfighters and lawmen, and something about the old drifter reminded him of those tales. The way the man carried himself. The alertness that never quite slept. One afternoon, Tommy worked up the courage to approach. The old man was sitting on a bench outside the general store, watching the street with those quiet, careful eyes. "Mister," Tommy's voice cracked halfway through the word. The old man turned slowly. No sudden movements. His face was lined like a canyon wall, but his eyes were kind. "Yes, son. You were someone once, weren't you? I mean, someone important?" A ghost of a smile touched the old man's lips. "We're all someone, Tommy. Every single one of us matters." "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant." The old man's gaze drifted back to the street. "But who I was doesn't matter much anymore. Who I am now is just an old man trying to find some peace before the end. Tommy wanted to ask more, but something in the old man's voice made him understand the conversation was over. He wandered off, still curious, still certain there was more to this stranger than met the eye. The old man returned to his quiet observations. He watched the town's rhythms. The miners who came in on weekends, already spending money they hadn't earned. The shopkeepers who counted their diminishing stock with worried eyes. The sheriff who drank too much and enforced too little. And he noticed when the air changed. It was subtle at first. Conversations that stopped when certain men walked by. Shopkeepers who suddenly found reasons to close early. A tension that crept through Redemption Valley like winter frost. The source of that tension rode in on a Saturday afternoon. His name was Cole Brennan, and he entered the valley like he owned it. 26 years old, dressed in black with silver conchos on his gun belt that caught the light like mirrors. His horse was a thoroughbred that had probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Behind him rode 4 men who watched the street with the casual menace of those who knew their reputation preceded them. Cole Brennan was fast, maybe the fastest gun in 3 territories, if you believe the stories. He'd killed 11 men in formal duels, and God knew how many in situations that didn't make it into newspaper accounts. He wore his legend like a crown, and he'd come to Redemption Valley because he was bored and looking for entertainment. The town recognized the danger immediately. Doors closed. Windows shuttered. Parents pulled children inside. The few people who remained on the street found urgent business elsewhere. All except the old drifter. He sat on that same bench, watching Cole and his men ride past. His expression didn't change. His hands remained still in his lap. To Cole, he was just another piece of broken furniture in a dying town. Cole and his crew took over the Golden Eagle Saloon. Within an hour, they'd run off most of the regular customers and turned the place into their personal kingdom. Cole sat at the best table, dealing cards and drinking whiskey, his gun belt hung on the back of his chair where everyone could see it. The old drifter came in around sunset. He moved through the door like smoke, drawing no attention, making no noise. Found a table in the corner. Ordered beans and a beer. The bartender, sweating despite the evening cool, brought the food without meeting his eyes. For an hour, nothing happened. The old man ate slowly. Cole played cards and won. His men laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. The few remaining locals tried to make themselves invisible. Then Cole noticed him. "Well, look at that," Cole said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "We got ourselves a genuine relic. Probably older than this whole town." His men laughed on cue. The old drifter continued eating, eyes on his plate. "I'm talking to you, Grandpa." Cole stood up, swaggering across the room. His boots rang loud on the wooden floor, a deliberate contrast to the old man's whisper-quiet spurs. "You deaf as well as ancient." The old man looked up slowly. His face was calm. "I hear fine. Just have nothing to say." "Nothing to say?" Cole's smile widened. "That's because you're smart enough to know your place. Old men should sit quiet and let real men do the living." "I'm sitting quiet." "Yeah, but you're doing it in my line of sight, and that bothers me." Cole leaned on the table. "See, I don't like looking at things that remind me of death and decay. Makes me uncomfortable." The old man's eyes met Cole's. For just a moment, something flickered in those weathered depths, something that made Cole's smile falter. But it passed so quickly Cole convinced himself he'd imagined it. "I'll finish my meal and leave," the old man said quietly. "No." Cole straightened. "I want you to leave now, before you ruin my appetite with all that old man smell." The room had gone absolutely silent. Even Cole's men had stopped laughing. Something about the tension felt wrong, felt dangerous in ways they couldn't quite name. The old drifter put down his fork, pushed his plate away, stood up slowly, joints protesting the movement. He was taller than he looked sitting down, but age had bent him enough that Cole still had 3 inches on him. "As you wish," the old man said. He reached for his hat. "Wait." Cole's voice stopped him. "Aren't you forgetting something?" "What?" "An apology. You disrespected me by making me walk all the way over here to tell you to leave. That deserves an apology." The old man's jaw tightened. "I meant no disrespect, but you caused it anyway. So apologize. On your knees." Now the danger in the room crystallized into something sharp and specific. This wasn't about discomfort or annoyance anymore. This was about humiliation, about establishing dominance, about forcing someone to break. The old man stood very still. His breathing remained steady. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "I won't do that." Cole's hand drifted toward his gun. "Won't or can't. Maybe you're so old and broken you can't even kneel anymore. I can kneel just fine, but I won't. Not for you. Not for anyone." Big words for someone who probably can't even hold a gun steady. Cole's fingers brushed his holster. "Tell you what, old man, I'll give you a choice. Either apologize on your knees or step outside and let's see if you can back up that stubborn pride." It was a trap, a no-win situation. Kneel and be humiliated. Refuse and face the fastest gun in 3 territories. Either way, Cole won. Either way, the old drifter lost. Unless he was something other than what he appeared to be. The old man looked at Cole for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slowly. "I'll step outside." Cole's grin could have lit the room. Finally, some entertainment. "Boys, we got ourselves a show." The whole saloon emptied into the street. Word spread fast in small towns. Within minutes, it seemed like half of Redemption Valley had materialized from nowhere, lining the boardwalks, watching from windows. They knew what was about to happen. They'd seen it before in other towns, other times. The young gun proving his speed. The old man dying in the dust. Tommy pushed through the crowd, his face pale. He caught Margaret's hand. "We have to stop this." "Nobody can stop it now," Margaret whispered. "It's gone too far." The old drifter walked to the center of the street. The sun was low, painting everything in shades of amber and blood. Dust swirled around his boots. He stood there, waiting, his posture relaxed but ready. Cole took his position 40 feet away. Close enough for certainty. Far enough for theater. He loosened his shoulders, rolled his neck, flexed his fingers. Made a show of it. This was his stage, his moment, his legend growing with every breath. "Last chance, old man," Cole called out. "Walk away. Live out whatever time you got left." The old drifter's voice carried across the space between them. "Can't do that." "Why not? You got some reason to die today. I got a reason to stand." "That's enough." Cole shook his head, grinning. "Your funeral. Literally. For the record, I'll draw first. Give you every advantage. Won't matter, though. You'll be dead before your hand touches leather." He was right about one thing. It wouldn't matter. But not for the reason he thought. "I'm counting down from 3, Cole announced, playing to the crowd. "When I hit 1, I draw. You do whatever your old bones will let you do. 3. The old drifter's eyes never left Cole's hand. His breathing slowed. His shoulders dropped half an inch. 40 years of muscle memory took over, pushing past age and stiffness, finding the pathways carved by 10,000 draws, 10,000 practices, 10,000 moments just like this one. 2. Cole's confidence was absolute. He'd done this 11 times before. 11 men had stood where the old drifter stood. 11 men had fallen. This would be number 12. An even dozen. Good for the legend. 1. Cole's hand flashed downward, fingers finding the grip, thumb breaking the leather strap, barrel clearing the holster in one smooth motion that had made him famous across 3 territories. Fast. Impossibly fast. A blur of motion that most men couldn't even track, let alone counter. But the old drifter was already moving. Not in response to Cole's draw. In response to the micro-telegraph that came before it. The shift in Cole's weight, the tension in his shoulder, the fractional widening of his eyes. The old drifter read these signs at a level below conscious thought, responding not to the action, but to the intention that preceded it. His hand moved, not with the flashy speed of youth, but with the ruthless efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime reducing every motion to its absolute essential. No wasted movement, no unnecessary flourish. Just the terrible, economical grace of someone who'd survived when faster men had died, because he'd learned that speed wasn't about muscle. It was about precision. The sound of 2 guns firing arrived as one. Bang! The echoes rolled off the red cliffs and came back like judgment. Cole Brennan's bullet went exactly where he'd aimed it, through the space where the old drifter's heart should have been. But the old drifter had shifted, a rotation so subtle it was almost imperceptible, and the bullet passed through air and buried itself in the wall of a building 30 feet behind him. The old drifter's bullet went exactly where he'd aimed it, not through Cole's heart, but through his right shoulder. The impact spun Cole halfway around. His gun dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers. He stumbled, caught himself, stared down at the blood spreading across his shirt. The old drifter's gun was already back in its holster. His hands hung at his sides. Steady, absolutely steady. Cole looked up, his face twisted with shock and pain and the dawning realization of something impossible. How did you? Name's Ethan Wade, the old drifter said quietly. Maybe you've heard it. The name rippled through the crowd like electricity. Gasps. Whispers. Tommy's eyes went wide. Ethan Wade, the ghost of Sonora. The man who'd tamed 4 towns, killed 23 men in the line of duty, and then disappeared 15 years ago after the death of his wife and daughter. The legend people told stories about. The gunfighter who'd been faster than anyone until the day he hung up his badge and vanished. Cole's face went white. Not from blood loss, from understanding. He'd challenged a myth. He'd mocked a legend. He'd forced a gunfight with a man who'd been impossibly fast in his prime and had somehow remained fast enough even with age and grief slowing him down. Ethan walked forward slowly. Cole tried to back away, stumbled, fell to his knees. His shoulder bled freely now, crimson soaking through fabric and dripping into the dust. Please, Cole whispered. His legendary confidence had evaporated. He was just a scared young man, facing consequences he'd never imagined. Please don't kill me. Ethan looked down at him. His face was sad, tired, ancient. I'm not going to kill you, son. You are not. No. Ethan's voice carried across the silent street. I've killed enough men. More than enough. Each one sits on my shoulders. Each one whispers in my sleep. I came here trying to outrun those ghosts, but they followed me anyway. They always do. He knelt down, ignoring the protest in his knees, and tore a strip from Cole's own shirt. Started wrapping the shoulder wound with practiced hands. I spared your life, Ethan said quietly, working the bandage. But here's what you're going to do with it. You're going to think about all the men you've killed. Really think about them. Their names. Their faces. Whether they deserve to die, or if they were just in your way. You're going to ask yourself if your legend was worth their lives. Cole's face crumbled. Tears mixed with dust on his cheeks. I know. You never thought about it. That's the problem with being fast. You can kill so easy that you forget there's weight to it. There's cost. Ethan finished the bandage, pulled it tight. This shoulder's going to heal, but it'll never be the same. Cold weather will make it ache. Fast draws will hurt for the rest of your life. That's your reminder. That's your chance. He helped Cole to his feet. One of Cole's men started forward, hand on his gun, but Cole waved him off with his good arm. Get him to a doctor, Ethan said. Keep the wound clean. He'll live if you're careful. The 4 men helped Cole toward the doctor's office. The crowd parted for them, silent, processing what they'd witnessed. This wasn't how these stories were supposed to end. The villain was supposed to die. Justice was supposed to be final. But maybe mercy was a different kind of justice. Tommy broke free from Margaret's grip and ran to Ethan. That was, you're really him? Ethan looked down at the boy, put a weathered hand on his shoulder. I was him, long time ago. Now I'm just someone trying to make different choices. But you're still fast. Faster than anyone. Fast enough to survive. Not fast enough to outrun regret. Ethan's eyes found Margaret in the crowd. Ma'am, I'll be moving on tomorrow. Don't want to bring more trouble to your town. Margaret shook her head. Mr. Wade, Ethan, you just saved a young man's life. Showed him mercy when you could have killed him. Redemption Valley could use someone like you. I'm not who I was. Maybe that's exactly who we need. Ethan stood in the street, the crowd around him, the red cliffs watching like ancient judges. He'd come here to hide, to disappear, to maybe find some peace before age or bullets caught up with him. Instead, he'd been found, named, pulled back into the world he'd tried to leave. But maybe running was never the answer. Maybe the ghosts would follow him everywhere until he found a way to live with them instead of fleeing from them. I'll think about it, he said finally. That night, he sat in his room above the general store, looking out at the valley bathed in moonlight. His shoulder ached, the old injuries always did when he pushed himself. The draw hadn't been as smooth as it once was. 20 years ago, Cole would have been dead before he cleared leather. Now, Ethan's body had required him to make different choices. Wound instead of kill. Mercy instead of murder. Maybe age had given him something speed had taken away. 3 months later, Cole Brennan returned to Redemption Valley. He rode alone this time. His 4 men had scattered after the shooting, their loyalty contingent on their leader's invincibility. Cole's shoulder was healed, but stiff, exactly as Ethan had predicted. He'd spent those months thinking, just as Ethan had ordered. He found Ethan in the small office next to the general store. Ethan had taken Margaret up on her offer, accepting the deputy position the town had offered, not out of a desire for authority, but from a simple need to be useful. "Mr. Wade," Cole said from the doorway. Ethan looked up from paperwork, gestured to a chair. "Cole, I wanted you to know." Cole struggled with the words. "I thought about what you said, about the men I killed. I found their families when I could, made what amends were possible. Some wouldn't see me. Some cursed me. A few forgave me, though I'm not sure I deserved it. What are you going to do now? I don't know. Can't go back to what I was. Don't know how to be anything else." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You're young. You've got time to learn. The question is, what do you want to learn? How to be someone other than a killer. That's a start." Ethan pulled out a second chair. Redemption Valley Sheriff just quit. Took a position in Sacramento. They're looking for someone to fill the role. Someone who understands violence, but chooses restraint. Someone who's seen both sides of the law and knows the difference matters. Cole stared at him. "You can't be serious. Me? A sheriff?" "I said the same thing when they offered me the deputy position. But here's what I've learned. Redemption isn't about who you were. It's about who you choose to become." Ethan stood, walked to the window. "You proved you can be fast. Now, prove you can be wise." Over the years, the story of what happened in Redemption Valley was told and retold. Some said Ethan Wade and Cole Brennan became the best lawmen the territory had ever seen. Some said they cleaned up 3 counties and turned the valley into a place where people wanted to live instead of leave. Some said the old ghost taught the young gun everything he knew, and when Ethan finally died, peacefully, in his sleep, 15 years later, Cole wept at his funeral like he'd lost a father. Some said the 2 men exchanged letters for the rest of Ethan's life, and that Cole kept those letters in a locked box he opened whenever he was tempted to draw on someone in anger. Some said the legend of that standoff, of the impossible draw and the even more impossible mercy, changed how young gunfighters thought about their craft, making them question whether speed was worth the cost. The truth is probably simpler and more complicated than any of those stories. What's certain is this. On that dusty afternoon in Redemption Valley, 2 men faced each other with guns drawn. One was faster than the other, but the faster one chose mercy instead of murder. And in that choice, both men found something they'd been searching for without knowing it. Wisdom, redemption, a different kind of strength. So here's the question for you. If you had Ethan's skill and Cole's arrogance, which would you choose? The easy path of violence, or the harder path of mercy? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if this story made you think, hit that subscribe button. There are more tales of choice and consequence coming. Thank you for watching. Some say Ethan Wade lived to be 83 years old. Some say he trained a dozen young lawmen in the ways of restraint and precision. Some say on cold mornings, you could still hear the whisper of his spurs on the boardwalk, checking the exits, measuring the distances, forever vigilant. But all of them say this. The day he spared Cole Brennan was the day Redemption Valley earned its name. And somewhere, in a valley between red cliffs where hope had almost died, 2 men proved that the deadliest thing you can do with power is choose not to use it.